Good evening, everyone. My name is Neeru Bhatnagar, and I would be hosting today's release on behalf of Routledge, Taylor and Francis, and Mobile Precious. We are honored to welcome our chief guest, Honorable Vice President of India, Shri Venkaiah Naidu ji, to this August gathering. I invite Ms. Amrita Jain, Chairperson of Mobile Precious, to deliver her welcome address. Please, Amrita ji.
Honorable Vice President of India, Shri Venkaiah Naidu ji, Dr. Pranab Sen, Mr. N. Ram, Ms. Uma Mahadevan, Ms. Anu Garg, Dr. Yasmin Ali Haq, Dr. Vimala Ramachandran, dignitaries present, our partners and donors, colleagues and participants. It is my privilege to welcome you on behalf of Mobile Precious for the release of our report, State of the Young Child in India. The pandemic not only made us abandon our original plan to release the report and do a virtual one instead, but it also made the situation of young children in our country decline further, making them more vulnerable to neglect and abuse. Therefore, the urgency to address the issue has grown manyfold. We cannot wait anymore. We hope that the report will highlight some critical issues and gaps and recommendations which will trigger a public discourse on early childhood development that will enable policymakers to design programs which are comprehensive in nature and will benefit all children under 6 years of age today, carving out a meaningful tomorrow for them. At the launch of this report, I must not fail to acknowledge all the childcare workers who have for decades tirelessly given care and nurture to millions of children across the country. It is their selfless work that has provided the proof of concept to the technical experts who have been able to put together the recommendations for this report. We are grateful to and value the fact that Honorable Vice President of India, Shri Venkaiah Naidu ji, has consented to release the report. Sir, your presence here today indicates your concern for and interest in the development of young children in our country. Your attention to the issue will give it the much needed importance and visibility, ensuring a promising future for every young child in India. Thank you.
Thank you, Amrita ma'am. I now invite Dr. Shashank Sinha, the publishing director of Taylor and Francis Group, the publisher of The State of the Young Child in India, to give his opening remarks. Please, sir.
Honorable Vice President of India, distinguished panelists, our colleagues from, esteemed colleagues from Mobile Crashes, and members of the audience who have joined us virtually for this book launch. On behalf of Routledge and the Taylor and Francis Group, I welcome you all to today's book event. As you may be aware, Routledge or Taylor and Francis Group is one of the world's largest publishers of academic books, journals, and online resources. The India or South Asia program was established in 2005-2006, and it follows the same global program that we follow across the world. And it also, the books which are published by Routledge are simultaneously made available in all formats, physical and digital formats, basically. The book being launched today is special to us in more ways than one. and the first one is that it offers very innovative and very interesting frameworks in the study of young child, and something that will be deliberated in detail in the next session, where our distinguished panelists take this up. The second one is we are very happy to be a small part of Mobile Crash's larger journey, or the larger societal connect. And third is that this reflects our constant commitment and preparedness to make knowledge available in all forms and formats. In this case, the open access format. The book has been published in an open access format. So what open access format allows authors or funders to publish books which are free to access and free to download under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial and No Derivatives license. It has several advantages. It provides very easy access to research. It provides wider dissemination and outreach, and it is more inclusive because it's available to the wider sections of the society. And it has a huge impact factor. So as when you compare it to an average non open access monograph, a recent report on open access says that the books which are done in open access format are downloaded 7 times more than an average non-OA book. It is cited 50 times more over a 4-year period, and it is in terms of online mention, it's mentioned 10 times more over a 3-year period. As far as the Routledge Books Open Access Program is concerned, I need to clarify a few things. That we follow all the required processes that we follow for all other books and all other knowledge products. That is, all these books which are also done through the open access program are subjected to rigorous peer review to ensure academic quality and integrity, and they follow the same production process and handled with same professionalism and with attention to detail. But it has a very high discoverability, in terms, so it is available on all the TNF ebooks platform and also a variety of digital distribution platforms. We also submit a copy to the open access publishing in European Network's online library. We have a very supportive global and a dynamic team. And if you want to buy, if anybody wants to buy print version or hard copies, they are available for sale. As the country negotiates newer forms of knowledge interventions by way of either the Digital India Drive or the changes which are being thrown up by the pandemic and or possibly also by the post-pandemic world, or what we now see is a move towards the new education policy, we believe that the OA or the open access model will play a bigger role, and we are fully prepared to deal with it. On that note, I'll come back to the book again and congratulate the team of the Mobile Crashes once again for this very important and timely intervention, and we thank you for publishing with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sinha, for emphasizing on the need for more open access research and policy studies to support decision making in the social sector. I now invite Dr. Anuradha Rajivan, former IAS officer and the development economist. Dr. Anuradha has been the key technical architect of the State of the Young Child India. While she is introducing the report, all the attendees can access the highlights of the report. Please download the document available to you in the handout section of your webinar window. We will also share this along with a full recording of the session with all attendees soon. Ma'am, we look forward to you introducing the report to our honorable chief guest, other dignitaries and guests at this virtual launch. Anuradha ma'am.
Thank you. Honorable Vice President and all participants present, hello from London and good evening. We know that no one wins by neglecting the young child. With this thought, I'm honored to introduce this report, The State of the Young Child in India, which has been actually a labor of love. The report's core team saw that a policy focus on the young child, that is a child under 6, needed to be amplified and better strategized. Nobody is against children, but the dominant narrative has been that the family is mainly responsible, and within the family, the mother. We see this worldwide. Early childhood is a time when significant human growth happens. It's also a phase when irreversible damage can take place, damage which cannot be fully corrected by any amount of later interventions. Yet, the role of the state is seen as supplementary, not as a center stage driver to influence child opportunities and outcomes. This changes dramatically when we look at the bottlenecks to a human's growth from a citizen's lens, from a rights lens. Bottlenecks arising simply from an accident of birth, for example, the social and economic conditions that a chance event places a baby in. Birth not only marks people for much of their lives, it also marks the country's economic prosperity when some children get left behind systemically. And the disadvantage is passed on across generations. It's a loss to the children individually, to the population groups and the regions they come from, as well as to the country as a whole. So a group of experts and practitioners started conceptualizing this work in early 2018. Our enthusiasm outpaced very often the resources we had. And when we thought we were nearly done, COVID intervened. But today, I'm very happy to finally bring this task to conclusion. There were many impediments. Money was short. We lived in different places and wanted to draw in India's experts. I needed all of them to work to a common timeline. We also wanted to draw from the decades of on-ground work by civil society and the world's largest publicly funded program, the ICDS. This provided some uncomfortable reality checks, but also many opportunities based on experiences within our own country. When we rolled up our sleeves and began work, we faced other gaps too, right from what the definition of a young child is. And then there were the invisibles, children of mobile populations living on construction sites, railway platforms or bus stations who could not find their way into any official data at all. There were several data challenges, even otherwise, pre-existing challenges, both with respect to availability over time as well as disaggregation, which is critical for more complete evidence, for tracking progress, and for making crucial comparisons. This is an area for future work. One by one, help came in from many sources. The work has benefited from funding support, from staff time, expert contributions, reviewers' feedback, consultations, as well as advisory guidance, for which the core team is truly grateful. In terms of themes, the report examines 5 key areas, each of them from a solutions-oriented lens. First, physical well-being, the survival, health, nutrition, and growth of a child. Second, cognitive development and early learning. Third, issues regarding safety, neglect, and abuse, which tend to be below the radar. Next, how India could better value the childcare workers, something long overdue. And finally, public funding for the young child, both allocations as well as expenditures at the center as well as at the states. Given that ours is a large and highly diverse society, geography and economy, this is really important that the center and the states work in tandem. And gender, we found, influences all of the above. It also influences how the childcare worker, in most cases a woman, is seen, commonly as a supplementary and part-time person paid just an honorarium rather than a full professional fee. This despite them being main family earners and working very long hours. So being underpaid and under-recognized needs to be rectified in order that India values its human resources. Recognizing that child outcomes are linked closely to child circumstances, the report looks at both. It presents a methodology for aggregating selected indicators in 2 easy-to-understand indices to assess and compare outcomes as well as circumstances across states. Such indices can also facilitate comparisons over time as well as other administrative units, for example, municipalities or districts. Outcomes are always of interest, of course. Outcomes can also establish results of programs and accountability in policy. But it is the environment in which the children grow that is more directly amenable to customizing interventions to very specific local conditions. And so it becomes important to look at both the outcomes as well as the circumstances. A childcare ecosystem that focuses more sharply on the youngest ages can make a big difference in countering the disadvantages of social attitudes or the accident of birth in a remote location or in a poor family, for example. Here is where policy, program design, implementation, budgetary allocations, plus expenditures and partnerships become crucial. The challenges are many, but they are not insurmountable. I'll end by saying if the state strengthens its strategic lead while civil society, the corporate sector, and media play their complementary roles, India could even be a leader among countries of Asia to improve the circumstances in which our children grow. Better outcomes should then follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rajivan, for sharing the journey of this comprehensive report and reminding us about the urgent actions moving forward. May I now request our Chief Guest, Honorable Vice President of India, sir, to kindly release the State of the Young Child in India report. I also request Ms. Amrita Jain to join our esteemed Chief Guest in releasing the report in this virtual launch event.
मुझे तो खोलना है ये अभी रुकिए खुल नहीं रहा अब खुल नहीं रहा हाँ ठीक खुल गया ना
Sir, thank you so much for releasing this report produced by Mobile Crushes and published by Taylor and Francis Group. By gracing us on this occasion, you have accorded the highest priority to the concerns and challenges faced by the youngest children of India and their families, especially the poorest citizens of India. Thank you, Amrita ma'am. I now invite Mr. Sanjay Kaul, former IAS officer, a member of the general body of Mobile Crushes, and an inspiration behind the report. I invite you to kindly welcome our Honorable Chief Guest for delivering the Chief Guest address on today's occasion. Please, sir.
Honorable Shri Venkaiah Naidu ji, distinguished panelists, sponsoring partners, and friends. Shri Venkaiah Naidu ji needs very little introduction. The Vice President of India, Chairman of the Rajya Sabha since August 2017, Shri Naidu ji is one of India's most prominent and respected leaders. Shri Naidu ji served as a minister in the Union Cabinet between 2000 and 2002, and again between 2014 and 2017. He has been one of the senior most leaders of the BJP and has served as its national president. Shri Naidu ji began his political career as a student activist and a leader and went on to get elected twice to the Andhra Pradesh Legislative Assembly. He was also elected and served as a member of the Rajya Sabha for 3 terms. Shri Naidu ji, I've heard him often, is a storehouse of knowledge and wisdom and extremely well known for his excellent oratory skills. Honorable Shri Venkaiah Naidu ji, we all look forward to your address, which we are sure will be an inspiration to all of us working for a better world for the underprivileged young child in India. Ladies and gentlemen, Shri Venkaiah Naidu ji.
Madam Amrita Jain, Chairperson of Mobile Crushes, Madam Devika Singh, Co-founder of the Mobile Crushes, Sri Sanjay Kaul, Member, Dr. Shashank Sinha, Publishing Director of the group, Dr. Anuradha Rajivan, Technical Advisor, Sri N. Ram, Popular Journalist, former Editor-in-Chief of Hindu, Madam Sumitra Mishra, Executive Director, and other distinguished dignitaries who are participating in this program and also watching this program. State of Young Child in India. इस महत्वपूर्ण रिपोर्ट का लोकार्पण करते हुए मुझे बहुत हर्ष हो रहा है। यह रिपोर्ट प्रारंभिक शैशव अवस्था में होने वाले विकास से संबंधित चुनौतियों का एक प्रामाणिक ब्यौरा होगा। इस रिपोर्ट में जो सलाह दिए गए हैं उस पर भी ध्यान दिए जाने का आवश्यकता है. I compliment mobile crashes and others associated with the bringing out this informative book, which will be useful for all the stakeholders, from policy makers to academics. All of us realize the importance of ensuring healthy, happy, caring, and playful early years for our children. All of us care for their well-being and holistic development. It is well known that the years from birth until the age of 5 are very critical. Adequate nutrition and positive caring environment at home play a very important role in a child's development. For healthy development, children should grow up in an environment where their emotional, social, educational, and other needs are fully met. A good foundation in the early years makes a difference through adulthood and even gives the next generation a better start. Educated and healthy people participate in and contribute to the financial and social wealth of their societies. As all of you are aware, poor nutrition hampers physical as well as intellectual development of children. It makes them vulnerable to illness and affects their performance in school. It is estimated globally that early childhood stunting affects nearly 1 in 4 children below 5 years due to lack of nutrition. As mentioned earlier, undernutrition and poor sanitation can lead to developmental delays and a lack of progress in school. For a country, poor early childhood development could mean economic loss. We need to understand the crucial importance of this aspect of national development and take effective steps to ensure all children have a healthy start to their lives. It has been mentioned in the past and also now in the just released report of the 159 million children aged below 6 years in India. 21% are undernourished, 36% are underweight, and 38% do not receive full immunization. These figures underline the crucial importance to invest in early childhood for realizing the full potential in later years. The report also pointed out to the insurmountable evidence of huge return on investment in early childhood development at the individual, household, and country levels. Proper nutrition, stimulation, and care during the first 1,000 days of life, from conception to second birthday, has a profound impact on the child's ability to grow, to learn, and rise out of poverty, and the process shapes society's long-term stability and prosperity, it was stated, the report. Based on ranking and values on the Young Child Outcome Index, YCY, the report named Kerala, Goa, Tripura, and Tamil Nadu to be among the top performers, while 8 states of Assam, Meghalaya, Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand, and Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, with scores below the national average, lagged behind. The report has rightly pointed out to the criticality of a holistic approach to development, including public awareness and parental education, improved living conditions with access to clean drinking water, proper sanitation, and reliable primary health care service to make a difference to health and nutritional standards among children. India has made considerable progress over the years in child welfare, undoubtedly. While Government of India has introduced several comprehensive policies and flagship programs like ICDS and the National Nutrition Mission, Poshan Abhiyan, for early childhood development in the country, the need of the hour is to implement them effectively through proper coordination among various ministries and at various levels, at the center, at the state, at the district, and also local level. The Rashtriya Bal Swasthya Karyakram is an important initiative for early identification and intervention for children from birth to 18 years to cover 4 Ds. D1, defects at birth, deficiencies, diseases, and development delays, including disability. Similarly, Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao is a very good program. It's equally important to ensure protection, education, and empowerment of the girl child. The recently unveiled National Education Policy rightly states, quote, the overreaching goal will be to ensure universal access to high quality early childhood care and education across the country in a phased manner. As you are all aware, India has been making conscious efforts the civil society organizations to intensify their efforts, ensuring the well-being of the young child through better policies and effective public programmatic interventions. In other words, there should be a well-strategized corrective action on multiple fronts. Ensuring the well-being of the child assumes greater importance if India has to take full advantage of its demographic dividend. We must continue to focus our attention on early childhood care and education. Child development should be the foundation of our developmental architecture. I underline, child development should be the foundation of our development architecture. My dear sisters and brothers, we are all reorienting our lives and adapting to a new normal in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic, which has disrupted our routine. The adverse impact of the pandemic on poor and marginalized families and their children has been quite severe. This is the time for all of us to come to the help of the needy, display collective resilience, and overcome the hardship caused by the pandemic. The lessons learned in this pandemic should stand us in good stead to effectively tackle any future health emergency, especially in regard to the well-being of our children and other vulnerable groups. Before concluding, I once again compliment mobile crushers and other organizations involved in bringing out this insightful report, including the publishers. I'm also happy to know just now it has been made accessible to all without any cost. You can open access it. I compliment the publishers for the same. This should be the way forward for many of the publications. And second, I would also like to compliment all the people who are involved in this study during this period, and then bringing together various minds and contributions together to put them in report so that there is a meaningful discussion, dissemination, and also serious consideration by all the people concerned. That is very much required. This, in fact, should become a societal or a people's movement. इसका एक जन आंदोलन का रूप देना, कारण क्या है, ये बच्चे हमारा भविष्य है. These children are our future. We should start taking care of them, and particularly the vulnerable sections. We must also remember our ancient philosophy of share and care, and take care more of the vulnerable sections. So Mahatma Gandhi ji ne, Baba Saheb Ambedkar ji ne, Deen Dayal Upadhyay ji ne kaha, Antyodaya, uplifting the poorest of the poor, taking care of the last man in the queue, जो अंतिम पंक्ति में बैठे, उनका उत्थान पहले होना चाहिए. That's why we must focus more care on marginalized and vulnerable sections, and both the government at the center and the state, and also voluntary organizations, must get involved in a big way to address these challenges. My dear friends, I feel happy to be here and release this publication, The State of the Young Child in India report. Such reports will provide an opportunity for all the concerned to understand what are the shortcomings, what are the urgent needs to be taken care, and the need to move forward. I would like to compliment them once again for bringing this report, and also compliment the publishing director, Taylor and the Francis Group, and also the participants in this meeting. Thank you very much. Namaskar. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir, for your inspiring and encouraging speech. Mobile crushes and our partner communities will be guided by your words as we strive harder for making our country a just, equitable, and safe place for all children of India. As we come to the end of this inaugural session, I would like to invite Ms. Sumitra Mishra, Executive Director, Mobile Crushes, to share a few words of thanks on behalf of Mobile Crushes. Sumitra, ma'am.
Honorable Vice President of India, Shri Venkaiah Naidu ji, on behalf of Mobile Crushes, we are grateful to you for releasing the State of the Young Child in India report and giving the issue of young children in India the highest importance it deserves. Thank you, sir. I thank all dignitaries, partners, friends, and participants who have joined us today. Early childhood development matters to you, and we stand together in making a difference for young children. I take this opportunity to express our indebtedness to all members of the technical team who worked on this report, particularly to Dr. Anuradha Rajivan, Mr. Sanjay Kaul, and Dr. Sam Sambandhan, without whose vision and high standards of scientific rigor, this publication was not possible. The authors of the technical background papers, Dr. Vimla Ramchandran, Mr. Venkateshan Ramani, Dr. Nandita Chaudhary, Dr. Renu Singh, Ms. Ranjani Murthy, and Ms. Mridula Bajaj. Your contributions form the backbone of this publication. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and knowledge so generously. The inaugural edition of the State of the Young Child in India is available today freely in the public domain only due to the faith and generosity of our funding partners. I place on record our gratefulness to Bernard Van Leer Foundation, the Hindu Center for Politics and Public Policy, Tata Trusts, HCL Foundation, and National Collateral Management Service Limited. By joining Mobile Crushes as our publishing partner, Routledge, Taylor and Francis Group has ensured that the message and recommendations from this publication reaches the widest audience across the globe. We remain grateful for your support. I take this opportunity to express my gratitude to the general body and governing council members of Mobile Crushes for putting their faith on the team to deliver this authoritative publication and for encouraging us throughout this period. Finally, I thank my team at Mobile Crushes who have contributed to this journey and continue to show remarkable resilience as we adapt to new ways of working, whether it is services for children on the ground or organizing an event, online event of this stature. Thank you, sir, and thank you, everyone.
But the film has to come, no? Because it should remain there. I thought we were. Switch it on. Switch off, no? तो मेरा तो off था.
Friends, we now move on to the next session.
Should I-
Once again, I welcome everyone who has joined us in this event. And I hope that you'll stay back with us for the next 45 minutes, as we are having a very powerful and a very wonderful panel discussion coming up. Before we begin the panel discussion, we have a 3-minute movie about the state of the young child in India, touching upon some of the key issues addressed in the report. So I request my team members to please screen the movie.
I request all the panelists to please switch off your video. I request Dr. Pranab Sen and Mr. N. Ram to please turn off your video.
Well-being of young children, that is conception to 6 years, continues to be a cause of concern in our country, and the pandemic has aggravated the situation further.
Early childhood is when significant human growth takes place. It's also a phase when enormous damage can happen, which cannot be fully corrected through any amount of later interventions. In fact, the first 1000 days provide a very strategic window of opportunity to make a difference.
The narrative on early childhood has been quite fragmented so far.
Important highlight of the report is the unique development of 2 young child development indices for the first time anywhere in the world. The first is the tracking of child outcome indicators, and the second is to identify the circumstances or the environment in which the child lives.
Yet significant concerns remain in spite of India's GDP growth. Malnutrition persists, ill health is a problem, cognitive development needs better focus, and in recent years there is a growing concern and recognition of the importance of neglect and even abuse, more so for young girls.
In India, like in much of the world, caregiving is very gendered. It is women's responsibility to look after children, and they also do unpaid work with regard to caring for milch animal or cultivating their husband's land, etc. So they're doing triple work, while men are responsible mainly for paid work outside the home, and they are considered the breadwinners. If we are to move towards a gender equal society, this has to change.
Which would mean bringing in women and work with the lens of the overlapping right of women and children.
It is widely recognized that quality childcare programs require good childcare professionals, for which a cadre of early childcare professionals need to be built up. They need to be adequately trained, remunerated, and accorded the dignity that they deserve.
At present, the government spends a very minuscule, less than 1% of its GDP on the young child. This translates into just about 140 rupees per month, or less than $2 per month for each child. We have recommended that the budgetary allocation should be enhanced to at least 4% of the GDP.
With this report, we hope and aim to present a comprehensive perspective on the situation to enable policymakers to come up with solutions that are strategic and integrated, holistic in nature, reaching out to all children with equity and equality.
We hope you liked watching the short film. With this, we now move on to the panel discussion titled a better future for India's young children beyond the pandemic. We are very privileged to welcome amongst us a distinguished panel to deliberate on this topic. I request all the panelists of this session to switch on their videos. On behalf of Mobile Crushes and all of us here, I extend a warm welcome to Dr. Pranab Sen, former Chief Statistician of India and currently Chairperson of National Statistical Commission. Sir, we welcome you to the panel. We are honored to have amongst us Mr. N. Ram, former Editor-in-Chief of The Hindu and a widely respected voice. Sir, welcome you to the panel and we look forward to learning from your insights. I am grateful to Madam Uma Mahadevan, Principal Secretary, Panchayati Raj, Government of Karnataka, for joining us in this very crucial discussion. Thank you, ma'am, for taking your valuable time. We remain grateful to Madam Anu Garg, Principal Secretary, Women and Child Development Department, Government of Odisha, for joining us here. We hope to learn from the innovative initiatives taken for young children and their families under your leadership, ma'am. A very warm welcome to Dr. Yasmeen Ali Haq, Representative UNICEF India, and a key partner in our efforts to ensure rights of every child in India is protected, and especially the right to early childhood development in today's context. Finally, not the least bit at all, I welcome Dr. Vimla Ramachandranji, a researcher, educationist, and an author of one of the technical background paper of this report to share her valuable comments. Welcome you, ma'am. With this, I once again welcome Mr. Sanjay Kaul as the learned moderator for today's session and hand over the mic to him. Over to you, Sanjay, sir.
Distinguished panelists, friends and colleagues, and supporting partners, we are really delighted to have all of you on the panel with us this evening. The overall objective of this short session, in our view, should be to explore strategic solutions. As Anuradha mentioned, this is a solution-oriented report, and we hope to able to prioritize the urgent and holistic needs of young children, especially as the Vice President pointed out, in the likely post-pandemic situation and the policy focus thereafter. While our panelists will give their views around the key highlights and recommendations that have been made in the state of the young child in India, I am hopeful and we are sure that they will look at the entire ecosystem and the broader ecosystem. We expect that a key takeaway of this session will be to identify urgent interventions for various stakeholders already represented on the panel. Namely, we have government officers, senior government secretaries, the media, the United Nations, experts, and civil society to undertake individual, sector-wise, as well as collaborative actions in order to prioritize the unheard and invisible voice of the most marginalized young children and their families. All of us gathered here are here because we are already committed to the concerns of young children and the challenges that prevents young children, especially the most vulnerable sections, from accessing their full rights and entitlements. We will therefore not ask them to do the diagnosis, but expect the panelists to go beyond why the issues is so critical and deliberate more on the how and what next, what we should do. In the present context of the pandemic, when India's GDP is projected to contract by over 10% this year, a central question that arises is, how can the voices of children, especially young underprivileged children, be heard and the child get fiscal priority? To set the ball rolling, and in this context, there would be nobody better than Dr. Sen, to share his views on what he feels are key issues that we need to address, and more critically, where he thinks the needed money could come from for the young child, and what we as stakeholders can do to find solutions that will help increasing the funding pie for the young child, and for the recommendations that emerge from this report. So I now hand it over to Dr. Sen for his opening remarks. Dr. Sen, you are a...
Yeah, can you hear me now? Are you audible? Am I audible now?
Yes, you're fine now.
So thank you for inviting me to open this session. Let me first, I think, make very clear in what you said just now. You talked about the marginalized, the invisible young child. And this is true. You know, I spent a long time in government, as you did, and most of that time was spent in the Planning Commission. The fact of the matter is that when you think about public policy, a lot of public policy comes out of political imperatives rather than a sense of what the nation needs. And political imperatives, unfortunately, have a characteristic that the time horizon is usually fairly short. The young child does not in any way figure in the calculus of the election mathematics. This is sad, but what is worse is that perhaps the linkage between what governments do in terms of welfare of the young child does not seem to figure again in the consciousness of the parents in terms of what the state is doing for them. Now, the experience that we had is that the young child in particular, children by and large, but the young child in particular, tend to be overlooked to a very large extent. And it was really almost a path-breaking step when Government of India decided to have a separate ministry for women and children. I would have preferred that it should have been just children. But anyway, it was clubbed together. But we got a ministry for women and children. And when it came, it actually managed to do a fair amount because a lot of political capital had gone into it. But if you look at what has happened in the nearly 30 years that have passed since then, the role and status of the Ministry of Women and Child has actually steadily declined in government. It no longer has the same voice, the same clout that it used to have in the 90s. And it is therefore no wonder that the attitude towards the public interventions for young children is eroding day by day. The only solution to this is that in the public discourse, we need to be able to interject a much longer term framework over which policy is made. So if you think about the young child, we're talking about 0 to 6. You're talking about a minimum of 15 years perspective, which is when these children are going to become voters. Then they can look after themselves. Now, a 15-year perspective was what the Planning Commission was charged with, which is why some of this happened. Unfortunately, that particular system has gone. Time horizons have shortened dramatically over the last 6 years. And so I'm not blaming the government or anything. The fact is that the NITI Ayog is supposed to be looking at longer term issues. But to the best of my knowledge, NITI Ayog has not come up with anything meaningful in terms of interventions for children and the importance of those interventions. So we need to energize that system. We need to bring back substantively a longer term horizon in terms of the way we look at our people and we look at our households. I think that is priority one. What the specific interventions should be, I believe, is something that is a lot more nuanced actually, because different parts of the country represent different cultures, they represent different attitudes, they represent different capabilities. And I think those are decisions which are much better taken at the state level. And so when we are talking about a blueprint for the development of the young child, it has to be a national approach in terms of perspectives, but a local approach in terms of specific interventions. So if you think about it that way, what you really need is something the equivalent of the GST Council. The GST Council was created because the entire political system recognizes the need for money here and now. It's not a 15-year time horizon they're talking about a less than 1 year time horizon. So there is a lot of commonality of interest in creating something like the GST Council. But unless you have that kind of a system in place, where there is a continuous dialogue between those who make broad national level policies and those who actually design implementation, we are going to continue to flounder. And the kind of nuancing that we need to be able to address the problems that we are seeing in different parts of the country will simply not happen. The center always has a tendency to go with a one-size-fits-all. And I think we have people from the states who I'm sure have been implementing ICDS. And I'm sure they're more than aware of what the limitations are that are placed by the central government. But these are voices that need to come out. And this is not a voice that's going to come out very much from the political system. It has to come from civil society, and it has to be orchestrated. How this is to be done, I am not the right person to speak about it. Mr. Ram, whose voice is heard much more loudly in public fora, would be better qualified to talk about it. But unless this is made into a movement led by civil society, led by people who think longer term, who think about the future of our nation, I'm afraid we are doomed to continue to make the mistakes we're making today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sen, for, as usual, very candid and, could I say, very blunt remarks. And I think you've also set the agenda for what Mr. Ram should talk about. And Mr. Ram, as Dr. Sen points out, children are not a political priority for India. And any macro policy decisions leading to enhanced attention or budgetary allocation needs that political commitment. So can we look at what we can do differently to gain the political will for India's youngest children? And more specifically, what we'd like to hear from you, how we can at least address the media to focus on these issues. And there's no better person in the media world today than you, Mr. Ram. So, Mr. Ram, ladies and gentlemen, we'll look forward to hearing you.
Thank you, Mr. Kaul. Sanjay, you can call me Ram, you know me. So, let me first commend the authors and all the people who worked on this excellent report. I haven't quite finished it, but it is something original and something very, very important, I think, and needs close study. But on the question, how and what we can do differently, obviously there are no shortcuts here. The route to take is public action, and it demands a lot of work, grunt work, as well as imaginative work on several fronts. This is a general statement, but Amartya Sen and Jean Dresse, in their book Hunger and Public Action, published nearly 30 years ago by Clarendon Press, Oxford, elaborate on the idea with several illustrations, and I think it's worth going back to that book and books of that and research of that kind. Public action, they explain, connotes not merely the activities of the state, but also social actions by members of the public. And here comes an important differentiation. They talk about collaborative, that is through civic cooperation, as well as adversarial, through social criticism and political opposition. I think it's a rich book in terms of both ideas and illustrations. Let me add that as in the battle against hunger, which is what that book is about, here's the book. The state, in the battle against hunger, the state does have a major role to play in changing the grim conditions and prospects facing the young child that Mobile Creche's data and evidence-based report, Study of the Young Child in India, addresses with sensitivity, reflection, and nuance. But the key thing here is evidence-based. And the two indices you have provided, I think, are quite a powerful way of triggering a discussion on this question. So the state's role, of course, has many aspects. And as Sen and Dress underlined, the reach of public action goes well beyond the doings of the state and involves what is done by the public, not merely for the public or in the name of the public. Absent public vigilance and activism, they point out, the nature and effectiveness of the activities of the state can deteriorate very easily, and we saw that big time during the pandemic. Absent this vigilance, absent access to public fora and so on, you saw what happened, and I think that film, those scenes in the film brought them out quite powerfully. I think there's a straightforward public interest issue involved in addressing the issues raised by the report, public interest, and putting to immediate work the recommendations it makes. Dr. Sen rightly pointed out how this is not an, doesn't figure in electoral mathematics. And I think he knows a lot about that because he's been involved with data all his life, working life. We know the public is not a homogeneous mass. It is driven by class, ownership, occupation, gender, community, and culture, divisions of all that. And different interest groups generate different pulls, including conflicts. So as in the battle against hunger, there'll be a need to consider what Sen and Dress call a plurality of levers and a heterogeneity of mechanisms in any strategy or public action in the cause of the young child. Creating understanding of the issues, raising awareness, obviously will be a key to the success of public action. And I think lobbying has the word lobbying has a bad odor, but I think it's time to form active lobbies or coalitions really work actively on this issue. Sanjay, on the issue of the media, role of the media, how do we get the media, especially the news media, to focus on these issues? That's a hard one. I may mention here that I did a study several years ago for a book edited by Sen and Dress on an independent press and anti-hunger strategies, the Indian experience. I'll be happy to provide you a PDF. The press, following up on a well-known observation by Amartya Sen, that the Indian press is very good at covering hunger as crisis, hunger as emergency. It's not good at all in covering hunger, regular hunger, what is called silent hunger, undernutrition, malnutrition, chronic hunger, and by extension, subhuman poverty and deprivation. Sen calls them tame issues. Very, very good in times of extreme drought or famine, and blowing the whistle on what's happening. Very poor in dealing with the silent, regular, chronic phenomenon. And that, I think, really provides a perspective, I think, a powerful perspective on how these issues, all the issues raised in the study, will fare with the media. I think there's some improvement over the years, but it's not adequate at all. Finally, I just want to give you a sense of my thinking on what the news media can do. As far as the press is concerned, in my own research on this question, I also, based on also my experience, I think I would demarcate these functions or roles for the press, an independent press. Sadly, that independence has been eroded in recent times. I don't want to go into the reasons for that. And you see a lot of propaganda rather than independent work in the news media. But back to the functions, the credible information function. Report, highlight this report. For example, this report, highlight the recommendations, make a distinction between the important and the unimportant detail. Bring it out as well as you can. Bring it out clearly, faithfully, concisely. And if you can't do it yourself, talk to experts to do that. Good reporting, first-class reporting. Secondly, of the kind that the Financial Times, for example, would do on some major issue, which is within its ken. Secondly, a critical function, by which I mean critical, investigative, analytical, even adversarial. As, you know, San Andres used that word, cooperative as well as adversarial. That's very, very important for the press and by extension, all the media. Thirdly, if you are up to it, we play an educational role. And very often we are superficial. There's not enough time or space, etc. Those are our excuses. But superficiality characterizes much of journalism. But there are exceptions to that, and you can go beyond that, particularly if you import academics, intellectuals, specialists, experts into, you know, draw them into writing or speaking on your media, appearing on television. Some of it is being done, but given the potential, I don't think we are anywhere near reaching it. Finally, if you do all these three things, the credible information function, the critical function, the educational function, you come to what can be called an agenda building role. Not agenda setting, which is too tall a claim, but agenda building in partnership with others like mobile creches and so on. And in that sense, the Hindu Center for Politics and Public Policy had a small role. You'll remember, Sanjay, in the beginning. I wish we could have contributed more to this, but then I think it really took off. And despite the obstacles that Anu mentioned, I think this is a splendid piece of research and publication. So I think, so we do need to do a lot more, but I'll come back to this business of lobbying, forming sustainable, sustained, permanent lobbies, coalitions, by whatever name you call them, including people like Dr. Sen and there are some of the other panelists, if you can give their time, and so on. I think some change can be elected. Right now, there are going to be important elections. We should lobby those all political parties in an even-handed way to put it on their election manifesto, whether they are sincere about it or not. I did it earlier for compulsory. I wrote to all parties and the days before primary education was made compulsory, mandatory in India. They all played lip service to it. Nothing happened till much later. But I think at the least we could start doing it. Frame the, you know, draft what you needs to get on the agenda, and some of us, I'm certainly willing to be part of that. We will address every political party that matters in elections that are ahead of us in the next few months, pandemic willing. Thank you, Sanjay.
Thank you, Ram. Thank you, Ram. And you've given us a lot of food for thought. I may also mention to all the participants that the Hindu Center for Public Policy and has been one of the partners in this entire exercise, and their Chief Administrative Officer Sam has been part of our core group. You know, and Ram, I wear now two hats. I'm a former civil servant and also got very closely identified with civil society. And I would like now to turn to Uma, wearing my civil servant hat. And Uma, you've implemented a lot of child-centered schemes at the grassroots level. And you're acutely aware of the wide disparities, even within Karnataka, the Hyderabad-Karnataka region, for instance, in the development outcomes of children. And what do you feel are strategic policy steps between the center and the states that could help bridge these gaps, and of course these intrastate variances. But you need not confine your remarks to this. I think you can give your take on what Ram and Dr. Sen have also said. Over to you, Uma.
Thank you, Sanjay, and thanks for having me on this panel. Already very interesting, and I've been making mental notes. I will return to the recording for a more detailed listen to everything that others have been saying. To start with, the scale of Anganwadis, the ICDS program in India. More than 1 million Anganwadis, something between 1.3 and 1.4 million Anganwadis, 2.8 million workers. More than government schools, more than ration shops, more than primary health centers, the Anganwadi is the most foundational government service delivery center in the community. And that I see both as a problem because of the scale, but also as an opportunity. At the same time, as you said, even within a state, huge diversity. You can have child stunting rates of 18% in one district. I take this from NFHS 4, and as high as 55% stunting in another district in the same state. So obviously, a one-size-fits-all program can't work. It's not only wrong in terms of resources, it's also wrong in terms of the injustice it causes because it spreads resources very unthinkingly. So flexibility is warranted. The second point related to the first is that data. Where is the data? Between NFHS 3 and NFHS 4, we had 10 years of a wait. Then came the CNNS. Not all parameters were incorporated, and so there's the question of comparability. Now we have the COVID pandemic, and we already see signs of food insecurity. I think it's now time for a national annual survey. We also need states need block level data in order to focus efforts. And in order to focus both limited state capacity and state efforts, I think we can even take data in a sensible and competent way. If we collect data, we can even start collecting data at Gram Panchayat level, and I'll come to that, why panchayats are important. We also need data along analysis of social inequities, gender, caste, tribal groups, and so on. So such being the case, the scale and the inflexibility, what is it that we need to do? The first thing is that ICDS is largely a rural program. Over 40 years, it has remained predominantly rural, but India is urbanizing. And therefore, the urban program needs attention. There is precarity, there are long hours, there are difficult living conditions in the slums, and special attention of Government of India and the states needs to be paid to expanding the Anganwadi programs in urban slums and in labor camps. This was acutely made aware to us during the COVID pandemic. The next point is that I think we can measure, and it's important to measure regularly and screen children regularly, but it's also important not to forget that direct nutrition interventions are key. Protein is key. Milk, eggs, sprouts, peanut chicken. These are the granularity. We can't just talk about calories and nutrition anymore. We need to get into the issue of protein energy malnutrition. Karnataka, for example, gives milk 5 times a week to 1 crore children from 6 months to class 10, and this is a program which actually enables women dairy farmers to earn some money as well. So this kind of program is something that states should look at developing. Karnataka also provides 2 eggs a week to all children, 1.5 million children. Now these are not trivial because they have important benefits to local egg producers. Women's groups locally are starting to keep poultry and produce eggs, and therefore the benefits are there in the village economy itself. These are doable, they have to be done. The next point is that Anganwadis are childcare, and we cannot ignore this important requirement for women. We need to make Anganwadis extended hours. Karnataka already has 7 days, working days for Anganwadis. We need to pay, this involves obviously paying decent wages to staff, providing supervision, supportive supervision with mobility to supervisors. We can't just tell them go and visit 25 Anganwadis a month without providing interest-free loans. These are things that states should actually get into. provide interesting loans for two-wheelers to supervisors to go and visit Anganwadis, because otherwise you have a million Anganwadis with a visit happening once in 3 months. That's not the way to run your Anganwadis. Childcare will also have an important beneficial effect on rural female labor force participation, and women are already 50% of Mahatma Gandhi Narega, they ought to be more than 50%. Linked to this is the point of Anganwadis becoming creches as well. Again, extended hours. We already have examples in coffee plantations, for example, in Karnataka.
Shit. I think we are having some problems with Uma's audio.
I request Mrs. Uma Mahadevan, please check your computer audio. Ma'am, please click the audio.
Uma, we'll get back to you. We are not able to hear you. So while Uma is able to get a connection back, Anu, can we turn to you? And, like Karnataka, I think Odisha has shown a lot of commitment in launching not only the state nutrition mission, but also identifying creches as a mechanism to tackle malnutrition, especially in the poorest districts. And I'm aware, for instance, the KVK region. For mobile creches, as you know, quality care is very critical, and it's been a mission for us. And we would like you to tell us how we as civil society can push states to increase creches. More specifically, how do you feel that we can convert Anganwadis into Anganwadi cum creches? Karnataka has talked about extension of hours. More critically, I think in the present times, how were you able to reach out to children during the COVID-19 pandemic, and how are you doing it now? Because we hear a lot of anecdotal information about children not being completely Anganwadi is dysfunctional, but I'm told that Odisha was able to do something. So we'd like to hear from you on what Odisha is doing. And as was pointed out by Dr. Sen, it's a state which has to take the initiative in childcare. So over to you, Anu.
Thank you so much. Thank you. When in March, when all the Anganwadis were closed, like the schools, that was the time we immediately started thinking what to do, because all the 3 to 6 year olds were coming to the Anganwadi centers and were getting a very nice hot cooked meal. In Odisha, we give 5 eggs per week, which means the child pretty much gets an egg a day. And so apart from that, they get... Can you hear me?
Yeah, carry on, Uma. Anu, your voice is breaking a little bit, but carry on.
Okay, so apart from 2 snacks, we were also giving them 5 eggs, dal, rice. So what we did then is that for the next 3-4 months since March, our Anganwadi workers have been taking the dry ration. So it's not just the dal and the rice, even the vegetables, the condiments, the oil, everything they make in little bags, and they take it to those households. Every month on a fixed day, they are giving that. Along with that, the eggs also. In a little bag, they take the 5 eggs per week. So every week they are going. And I had beautiful pictures of Anganwadi workers wearing masks and trying to maintain social distance while doing that. And also right now we are also going through bad floods. So even in floods, they wearing their red and yellow saris. They were trying to still give this ration. So that was something that was done. The second was that since we have fixed days for immunization and fixed days for health checkup for the child, again, that would have got lost because of all this. So what we did was that at least these fixed days we will observe. But what we did, we tried to stagger them. So the children did not have to come together. Some mothers came with their children, then after some time mothers came. So we continued with our immunization. We continued with our health checkup and referrals. The third thing that struck us was that whatever dance and songs and stories we tell the children in that 3 to 6 age group,
that preschool education was going to get completely lost, and that momentum which has been built. So we thought we'll now take that education to the parents, and we made calendars which we called Ghare Ghare Arunima, and we took those calendars, had activities. So let's say the theme of the month is insects. So the parents were asked to draw a butterfly with the child. Next day, sing a song with the child. Next day, wash hands with the child. So those activities we tried to continue with. Apart from that, we realized this is also the time when child abuse, child marriage, child labor, these are things which can increase. So continuously we kept stressing on that with our field functionaries that look, much as you're doing a very good job with ensuring that food, etc., reaches the houses, but it's very critical that you be alert to the child marriages or child abuse or this. So that was something we constantly monitored. Again, another thing was monitoring. Now, not many of our people were able to go to the field. So a lot of tele-monitoring, WhatsApp monitoring, all those type of things also started. So these were some things which we thought, and then our children in orphanages. Now, everywhere else in schools and hostels, children had a place to go to. So they went to their houses. But here the children stayed in the orphanages. And this is where we had to give a lot of emphasis to ensure that the children stay safe, stay happy, they continue to do yoga and things like that. So we had programs for them, cultural programs, etc., so that they kept busy. So these were some things that we tried. On your question regarding the creches, now creches, what in Odisha we have a little different model. We have not taken the Anganwadi model. What we have done is, it's a community-based model. So we have identified one larger NGO who, on an RFP basis, who then takes a cluster of creches. But the creches are taken only in those villages where parents themselves want a creche, first of all. And then somebody gives the place for the creche. And then they themselves decide who will be the creche manager. And if everything is decided by them, it's only the funds that are placed with this NGO. And the advantages are that maybe, I don't know, maybe the Anganwadi system will work also. But this is another way of doing it, where the focus is on the 0 to 3 children. There they have age appropriate, because they need to sleep from time to time. They have their other issues. Their food also has to be given so many times. So we try to, so this is a focused intervention for 0 to 3 children. We are seeing it because we have in our tribal areas, as you are aware, there are issues of nutrition and malnutrition and all that. But we think that this would be a means where when the mother goes, the children will be able to we will be able to give them food. Even otherwise, we give take-home ration, but we don't know how much of it is utilized. Here, we will be able to see that they are actually eating it, number one. Number two, we will be able to see that even cognitively, we are able to stimulate them with toys, swings, and generally talking to them. So we are seeing it as a very important intervention, both for malnutrition and for cognitive stimulation of the child. So this is a model.
Thank you. So thank you, Anu. And Karnataka and Odisha confirms that different innovations take place when you allow states to take a leading role in programs of this kind. And this is, confirming what Dr. Sen talked about. Uma, we'll come back to you. But you also pointed to data gaps, and that is something when my first interaction with Dr. Sen on this report, and we have finally also recommended that one major problem that we face was not getting regular credible data, and that Sarkari data was just not good enough for us to. We had to rely on sample surveys, but Anganwadi level data or primary school level data was just not possible for us to use. So I now like to turn to Dr. Haq, and UNICEF has had not only a commitment to the child for many, many decades, but you've also taken ECD as a priority strategy for UNICEF, and also it is a SDG priority. One of the major recommendations is to address data gaps and also look at best practices across, not only within India, but across the state, across countries. So what are the solutions that you, looking at it from a little bit nuanced outside view, what do you think we can offer as advice to governments plus other actors and stakeholders, including civil society like us, on such challenges? Sorry, I think we have got. Yeah,
okay.
yeah, you're okay.
All right.
You're okay
So,
now.
good evening, everyone, and nice to see you again, Uma, Anu, and Ram. It's been a long time now. This is the beauty of having this way of connecting, that from different parts of the country and the world we can connect together. But I'm so happy we're focusing on this topic, which is crucial for India, for all countries, but more also for India, because we see that early childhood care and stimulation has to be addressed if we are to get our dividend from our from the population of India. We have been definitely engaged with the government and with various research organizations, because data and evidence is crucial. It's the foundation for sound programming, for programming that shows results for children. And with that, I can give example of the Comprehensive National Nutrition Survey, which was completed last year, which we've been able to generate data sheets for all 31 states and union territories. And that provides the basis for looking at where are the micronutrients, where are the behavioral gaps. So gap is not just in data in terms of anthropometric measurement. It's also about what are the behavior and practices at the household, at the community, that has a strong bearing on children and their development. We've also been strongly associated with the India ECE longitudinal study, and we know how that study, the work of Young Lives and other credible bodies of knowledge have fed into the country's ECCD policy. We've also seen it moving into the newly announced national education policy. So the data for which demonstrates the solutions, how they work, and then that being adopted in policy is core to the way we work in India. Now, it's not just to set a benchmark, it's not just to give a snapshot, it's also that tracking progress. And I think that's where the routine data and the importance of that comes in. We do have opportunities, I think, through the ICDS CAS and other interventions. There has been a strong attempt to get data more organized, more routine in a way. The challenge is going to be in really examining what is being done with that data, with the Anganwadi workers receiving the handheld device. Are they transmitting the data? Is it being triangulated? How does it relate to the Anmol that the ASHA and the ANM are using? So it's not just about data in a vertical stream, it's about how are we really looking at the comprehensiveness of where data is collected for children, where are the overlaps, and how do we make sure that that data is really used for programming, because without that it remains just as data. Now for me this study is really important, and I look forward to, I haven't seen the full report yet, but really the data that is behind the key findings and recommendations, whether it's on investment, whether it's on how Anganwadi centers can be converted into creches also. It's how do we socialize the data? How do we build constituency? Dr. Sen talked about having alliances around it. But how are the families and at the local level using it also? We keep giving out a lot of information, a lot of data, but unless it's used locally, how can an Anganwadi worker or the block supervisor use that data and be motivated to use the data and able to show change? And that it's not based on a report card system, because that people then are focusing more on the data than what is happening. And so I think that's where, if we involve parents, communities in that, it's going to be extremely important, because it's not just numbers, it's about what's behind those numbers. I know we keep loading things onto the Anganwadi center and the Anganwadi worker. We do need to rationalize. Time and again, that is coming in. So if we add creche duty on top of everything else, how is an Anganwadi worker, who is probably at the lowest rung of the ladder, but the one who is expected to produce magic for children and their families, are we enabling her? Are we doing a work analysis, a workload analysis? Are we building her capacity? Are we seeing that she gets the type of tools and supportive supervision that she needs? And all this requires information and evidence also. Especially in the COVID times, I think the vulnerability that is coming up of children and the system, even the frontline workers, the way they are being in the forefront, how it is affecting them, their own families, and their work. I think that's something where definitely we need to be looking not just at the delivery of services, but also the deliverer, and how we can support her in doing that. So I think I'll stop there and come back later.
Thank you, Dr. Huck. And on this data business, when I had met Mr. Dr. Sen, and we've incorporated his advice in our report, and which is something for Uma and Anu to also consider. The suggestion was that we should divorce performance appraisal, whether it is of Anganwadi workers or primary school teachers, from data gathering. Because if Anganwadi worker says that the participation of 0 to 3 children is only 40%, and if she's asked why it is not 70% and harangued, then she's not going to feed that data to you. So there's several. So I think when we ask Dr. Pranab Sen to respond to this issue, we'll request him to cover. But before that, can I ask Vimla? Vimla, can you hear me now? You have covered in your career multiple sectors. You worked on gender, you worked on education, and you've also contributed towards the vision of this book. So what would you think are the 1 or 2 urgent ones that you feel we should focus on? And you may, for instance, like to refer to ECCE in the context of the new education policy. So over to you, Vimla.
Thank you, Sanjay. I think one of the most urgent issues that we need to address now is what is going to be the impact of the implementation of the new education policy. Because while they talk about foundational literacy and numeracy by clubbing children from 3 to 8 years together, because the education cycle itself has been split into 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. What implication does this have for children up to the age of 6? And what implication does it have for ICDS and for preschool education? I will not go into the data, but just would like to mention one factor that in 2016, almost 30% of children were attending privately run preschool education centers. This may be a representation of people who are, quote unquote, not below the poverty line, and therefore they are opting for private preschool education centers. But I think the issue really that I would like to flag is that, does the ICDS center as it is today
have the human resources, technical and financial bandwidth to be able to implement and impart preschool education. Because over the last 20 years, I have been part of several government-sponsored evaluations of the ICDS program, and one of the weakest areas have been the preschool education as it is imparted in ICDS. Now, the question before us is, under the NEP, they are saying that where there would be some ICDS centers, it will be merged with the school, or schools may have preschool education classes. What I'm really afraid of, that between the Ministry of Women and Child Development and the Ministry of Education, this whole issue of preschool education may just fall between the cracks. And therefore, I think we really need to have, and this is something that the Ministry of Women and Child Development needs to initiate, is to actually have a kind of a working group which will work out how the two can actually work in unison. Because as we see that preschool education, NCERT is going to prepare some kind of syllabus, but what is happening to the preschool education within ICDS? The second point I'd like to say is that I don't think the Anganwadi worker has the time or the ability to do justice to preschool education. As Ranjani Murthy had pointed out both in her background paper as well as in the film that you showed, that the Anganwadi worker is a part-time worker. Now, what all do you want her to do? In many cases, at least I know in Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, Jharkhand, these are the areas where I've seen the Anganwadi system work from the ground up. The Anganwadi workers don't have the technical or aptitude to even do preschool education. So should the Ministry of Women and Child Development really think of adding an additional worker who's going to specialize in preschool education? And what is going to be the content of that preschool education? Because it cannot be just teaching the alphabets and numbers. We really need to look into the experience of the whole Montessori approach and other approaches in order to have a very vibrant preschool education program. And this is where I think we need to bring civil society organizations on board. It is not only mobile creche, but there are so many other organizations which have been working on early childhood care and education. I think we really need the Ministry of Women and Child Development and Education to sit together and work out how they're going to implement those aspects of the new education policy which require very, very urgent attention with respect to preschool education. Thank you, Sanjay.
Thank you, Vimla. Well, we were supposed to close by 6, but I'm taking the liberty of extending this session by another 5 minutes because we want to have one round of remarks from each of you. And I'm told, Ram, that you need to go. So maybe you can respond first. And given this kind of very rich discussion that we've had, what do you think we as civil society and mobile creches, given the political constraints, the pandemic and everything that you've heard, where do you think we should go now that we have this report? If there's going to be an agenda for us, what would you advise us to do? Ram, we are losing you. Are you on mute?
Yeah, I'm okay now.
Yeah.
I think organize more discussions based on this report over and over again, bringing out what is really important. The fact that these two indices, I think that's, I mean, it was mentioned that this is the first time in the world young child indices and young child outcome index and also the environment index. I think talk a lot about that. And also, as Dr. Ramachandran mentioned, I think bring in all organizations. Sometimes there are rivalries among NGOs. I know none of us suffers from that, I hope. But bring together a whole coalition, it was mentioned. Rope in the press, have somebody who is expert in sort of pressuring the press, lobbying the press. I can do something in that regard, suggest some people. You know, there are organizations where they come and pester you. They sit with the chief of bureau and do that. I think such persistent efforts have to be resorted to in this case. Do it with political parties in an even-handed way. And I think that should bring about some increase in awareness, at least about what is to be done, what is neglected, and above all, be frank and, shall I say, fearless in putting out views. I was pleased that the Vice President also appreciated the shortfalls that and the gaps that the pointing out, highlighting this and what needs to be done, because there will be a strong tendency on the part of governments, central as well as states, to resist, to deny, to be in denial about this, that we are doing better. The whole South will claim, for example. But there are parts of Tamil Nadu, I know, where there are real problems. So I think we have to be absolutely not just objective, but quite bold, because this is evidence based, and you know, too much of the so-called constructive approach, I think, will not get us very far. You have to do both. So those are my thoughts. But I think it's an important report.
Yeah.
The next year or so, you can get a lot of mileage from this report. And the
So
people
thank you,
who
Ram, and thank you for your optimism. Dr. Sen, your closing remarks, but in your closing remarks, can you also tell us something on your advice on data gathering? You know, when we are developing these indices, a lot of indicators we had to drop because we just didn't have data. And even the indices for the environment index, we couldn't even get comparable indices for 2 time periods. So, you know, how do you see this, and what do you feel that as civil society, and 2 state governments are represented here, what we can do to improve this? Because Ram also talked about an evidence-based policy action. So what do you feel that we can do? And finally, a very quick comment on what you think we should do as a next step.
Hey, Sanjay, before I come in, I would really like to hear the ending of what Uma was saying, because she got cut off.
I don't know whether Uma is still there.
She's there, but she was just about getting to an interesting point. Anyway, if she isn't there,
I don't see Uma there.
Yeah.
So once she comes back, we'll interrupt.
I think let me sort of begin with the point that Dr. Ramchandran made. I mean, this is kind of crucial. And it relates to what I had been talking to you about in terms of how you generate data from within the system, and why the ICTS data is kind of useless and nobody takes it all that seriously. The point is that looking after the young child is a professional job. It has more dimensions than any other occupation I can think of. Now, what you have is a person carrying out those functions who is number 1, part-time, number 2, not trained enough. Now, if on top of that, you add on a monitoring and control system, you are just making it impossible for that person to function. The right way of collecting data, I mean, data should be collected for 2 purposes. There is clearly need for collecting data for monitoring and control. Second is data being collected for informing the service provider. Because remember, at the end of the day, a person needs to be motivated in terms of what she is doing and the results that are coming therefrom. Our current systems in government puts both of them together in one place, and the net result is neither purpose is filled. The sensible way to go about it is really to collect the monitoring and control data from the beneficiary population. That is, you collect it essentially from the parents. And what the Anganwadi worker should be doing is collecting data which would give her a sense of how effective she's been. And this information should be conveyed back to her. I mean, this should not be going up to, through the state government, up to the national government, and then sitting in some repository there. It must be a continuous feedback loop.
Okay.
The real question.
So I think, can I now get Uma back in, because Uma, can you hear us?
Sanjay, will you allow me to leave? I have a commitment.
And thank you for being part of this discussion, and your advice has been very valuable. And Ram, this is not the last that we'll hear from you.
Hearing you.
And this is not the last that we'll be coming to you. Moment the COVID is out, I'll be back in Chennai and at your and I think now you'll have little freer time. So we.
Yes, I do. Thank you very much. Sure.
So Uma, Uma, if you can hear us. Uma, are you able to hear us now? I think connection is still.
I think. Uma, I think you're muted.
No, I think your screen is. So maybe we can just, we are running short of time now. So maybe can I request Anu to have your closing remarks on what you feel the state's agenda would be and what you would advise civil society to do.
So first of all, congratulations for this report and for having this kind of discussion. That's very, very good. And contrary to what most people think, even state governments are very open to getting these constructive criticism, and we certainly do want the gaps. We want to know the gaps. We want to know what other states are doing. So I think there is one thing which both media and civil society can really do, and that is to pick up these innovations that are being done and share it, because I have seen this within the state also. When one collector is told that, look, that collector has done this particular thing so well, you find that very quickly they also want to do, and they share what they have done. So it's not that a lot of positive things also happen. I am basically an optimistic person. I think a lot of good things are also happening. Our Anganwadis have also delivered in a very, very major way. But we also need to share that so that everybody can learn, and in case they feel it is worth copying or emulating, then they do. Otherwise, they just appreciate and share with the others what they may have done. So I'm sure that is something which you all can do.
Thank you. Uma, are you able to hear us now? We are still not able to hear you. Can you from Dr. Haq maybe give your quick closing remarks on what you feel we should now do as mobile creches, as civil society and other stakeholders represented here?
Well, first of all, I would say, keep the focus on this. It's so important that we get this evidence, we get this learning from civil society fora, and keep challenging us and asking these questions and how we translate it in the different work we do. I think it's really important that we see what's coming out of the recommendations, especially to look at how we can provide better support to parents in caring for their children. I guess mobile creches really is from that perspective, that the parents are enabled to have a nurturing environment, and that especially in COVID times is going to be crucial even as we recover from COVID. So I would really ask you to keep the challenge going and to keep looking at not just the data, but also the story behind the data. And I think you have a wonderful opportunity to spread examples of what is working, because that's also very important, that we not get disheartened, and that we look at not just the Ministry of Women and Child Development, but the Ministry of Panchayati Raj has a huge role to play. The SHGs have a role to play. How do we get the men and the fathers more engaged in this and not just have the burden on the mothers? and build on the evidence. We recently conducted a parenting study that showed in the home, children face they listed 30 different types of ways in which they are abused, either physically, verbally, or intellectually. How can we start changing the narrative around this? You have a huge role to play.
Thank you, thank you. And we will continue to count on UNICEF support as we move forward. Uma, one last attempt. Are you able to hear us, and would you be able to say something? Because we've just lost you and we were very much expecting you to say finish your argument. But are you on mute is that the reason we are not able to hear you? Vimla, maybe you can have the last word unless Uma is able to come in. We are really out of time, so you will have to be a little brief.
I have just a couple of suggestions. One, I think we should take the offer of Ram and also contact other newspapers and try and do a series of short articles on various dimensions and issues that the report has highlighted. And I think some of your writers, especially me, we can volunteer to write it. You don't have to pay us for it, because I think this is a commitment for many of us, and we really feel this is very important. The second one, which I agree with what Yasmin has said, is in terms of highlighting where are the states and districts where very good work is being done. And I think we need to really give more publicity to where things are working, instead of only talking about how terrible the situation is. And for that, we would need the support of a few state governments to provide this information. Once we get this information, and again, I'm quite sure you can muster a group of volunteers, Sanjay and Sumitra and all of you, who will be very happy to write this up for you purely of commitment. Thank you.
Thank you, Vimla, and thank you all for this very insightful discussion. And you've given us some areas. I don't think we have all the answers, but we have some of it. And Uma, I think you're on mute. And that's the one reason we are not able to hear you.
Umaji, your mic is on now. You can speak. I think she's facing a audio technical glitch at her end. Yeah. That's where she's Ranjani, not audible.
So I think we'll have to connect with Uma separately. But thank you all for your very practical and insightful suggestions on the way forward. And thank you, participants, for being with us, though we have overshot our time. And thank you again. And we'll be in touch with you, Anu and Uma, and of course, Yasmin. And of course, we'll take Vimla's suggestions on getting her to write for us and to all others. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all panelists and Mr. Call. Last couple of minutes before we wind up today's session. The session has actually given kind of the action plan for mobile crashes for at least the next 2 years. But what I take away mostly from all of you is to be bold, to be innovative, and to be fearless in that action plan as we take the agenda building forward. And you can count on us to come back to you for more advice and support from you. As we conclude, friends, we have received a lot of questions and comments to your discussions. Unfortunately, we did not have a question and answer format. So we've promised our attendees that we will get back to them with responses from you, and we will try and do that to all our attendees. Friends, as a part of our ongoing action on this subject, we are happy to share with you 5 policy briefs that have emerged from the recommendations of this report. You can access these briefs in the handout section of this webinar. I'm also very pleased to release the 6 independent technical background papers by their respective authors that form the core structure of this publication. All of these 6 technical background papers are available in the handout sections. You may also visit the Mobile Crashers website to retrieve these downloadable documents, all completely free for you to use, and you will find the website link on your chat box right now. Finally, as an open source publication, the State of the Young Child in India is available on the Taylor and Francis website, and a link to this is added to the Mobile Crash website as well. With this, I hand over the final words to Akash from Taylor and Francis Group.
Akash, you are on mute.
Muted.
Yeah, thank you, Sumitra. Hello, everyone. Thank you for making time for a very important book, State of the Young Child in India. On behalf of Routledge, Taylor and Francis, I take this opportunity to propose a vote of thanks to all of you who have made this possible. Firstly, Honorable Vice President Shri Venkaiah Naidu, Ms. Amrita Jain, Dr. Anuradha Rajivan, Mr. Sanjay Kaul, thank you for your expert comparing. Ms. Sumitra Mishra, of course, Dr. Shashank Sinha, the panelists, Dr. Pranab Sen, Mr. N. Ram, Dr. Uma Mahadevan, and Dr. Anu Garg, Dr. Yasmin Ali Haq, and finally Dr. Vimla Ramchandran, who's also our author. Thank you for your thoughts and for an insightful discussion. And also thank you to the larger Mobile Crashes team for coming up with such a wonderful book. And dear listeners, thank you for making this possible. It's great all of you could join in what seems to be like the new normal. At Taylor and Francis, we are pleased to publish this volume, which is of utmost relevance to not just India, but also of crucial importance during a global health crisis. Right at the time of commissioning this title, when the pandemic was still far away, we were struck by the new ideas that it incorporated in its study of public health. And we would really like to commend Mobile Crashes on the Mobile Crashes team on coming up with on this feat. The book also reflects the time-honored tradition at Routledge and Taylor and Francis of publishing works that make a difference. As the world's leading publishers, we publish more than 2,600 journals and over 5,500 books a year, with a books backlist in excess of 120,000 specialist titles in a range of 40 subject categories. Our content spans all areas of humanities, social sciences, behavioral sciences, technology, and medicine, and we have published in a range of formats. Our Routledge India Originals program extends the Routledge tradition of excellence through publishing on the social sciences and the humanities to India and South Asia. I take this opportunity to thank the panelists, the author, and the esteemed guests for taking the time to attend this launch on such a topical volume. Last but not least, I also take this opportunity to thank once again Sumitra Mishra and her Mobile Crashes team, with whom it has been an absolute pleasure to work with. I would also be remiss if I did not mention my colleagues Anvita Bajaj, who has been involved in this book from day one, and also my colleague Rajni Dhingra for making this online book event possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we conclude the formal session as well. Thank you all, friends, for joining once again. Bye-bye. Have a good evening and a good weekend.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye. Bye, Sumitra. Bye, Sanju.
Bye. Okay. Bye. Bye. Bye.